Hello everybody and welcome to lecture number 4 of programming in PHP. In this lecture we're going to discuss and show code examples of how to loop through code in PHP. When I say loop, I mean a repeated task. So in PHP there are 4 ways to loop through code. In this lecture, however, I'm only going to go over 3 of them. Next week, when we learn about arrays, we will learn the 4th way of looping through PHP code. But in this week, we're going to learn a for loop, a while loop, and a do while loop. So let's jump into it. So I've created this file called loops.php, and now I've just opened up my PHP tags. So what do I mean by looping through code? It's stepping through code, and so it's going to go 1, it's going to go 2, 3, 4 until it's told to stop. The most basic loop in PHP is going to be a for loop. So I'll show you how we open a for loop. So what you do, you type the word for, and then just like an if statement, we want to open and close a set of parentheses, and then we want to open and close a set of curly braces. Now what goes inside the 2 parentheses are the arguments that are going to tell PHP when to start, when to stop, and how to iterate through it. So say we wanted to loop through some code 10 times. Okay. What we can say in a for loop, there's going to be 3 sections that are going to be telling PHP the answers to our questions. The first, where do we start? Okay, so we want to start at 0. So I'm going to create a variable inside of here. I'm going to call it I, and then I'm going to set that equal to 0. So it's going to say for, okay, we're going to start at 0. Now we need to tell it to go up to 10. So now we want to say stop it when, or continue it when I is less than 10. The reason I say less than and not less than or equal to is because if we were to put less than or equal to 10, it would actually go 11 times. So if we count it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that's actually 11. It's 11 iterations. So while it's less than 10, it's going to go from 0 through 9. And that's inclusive, so it's going to be 10 iterations. And now the next question a for loop asks is, how do we step through this? How do we continue the process? So, like we learned in the previous lecture, we can do I++. This was in the math lecture last week. So now we're telling the for loop, start our loop when I is 0, continue the loop as long as I is less than 10, and for each step of the loop, increment I by 1. So now, if I were to save this and just refresh my page, nothing's going to show up. Because like in an if statement, the code between the curly braces, it's what is going to be executed and shown onto our webpage. So an easy way we can do this is just, we can echo out our variable I. Oops, echo I. And remember the semicolon. So now if I were to go and refresh our loops.php page here, we're going to get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But say we actually wanted to do 1 through 10 and not 0 through 9. Well, you could say start at 1 and go until I is less than 11. So, like that. And if we were to refresh, we would get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Pretty basic stuff. So, let's play around with the for loop now. I'm going to set it back to 0 and less than 10. So say we wanted to find, we were trying to do a math problem here. So let's say we have a formula, like we're doing a summation or something. So while I is less than 10, we want to add onto a pre-existing variable 2 times I. So the summation would be from 0 to 10 of 2 times I. So let's create a variable outside of this for loop. Let's call it x, and let's just set it equal to 0. So now our formula is 2 times I. So what we can do, going back to our mathematical operations, we can say x plus equals 2 times I. And now if I were to refresh this, we're going to get a blank page because we haven't done anything with x after we've gone through our loop. So what we can do after the loop is over, we can simply echo x. So we would get 90. I'm not 100% sure if that's correct, but if you want to check it, go ahead. So what this code is going through, it's going starting at 0, so it's going to be 0 times 2, so that's 0. 0 plus 0 is going to be 0. Then it's going to do 1 times 2, and then 2 times 2, 3 times 2, 4 times 2, all the way up until 9 times 2. So we're going to get 18 plus 16 plus 14 all the way down to plus 0, and I guess that would equal 90. That's pretty much how we do a for loop. Now, say we wanted to actually start at 10 and go down by 1. Pretty simple. So, let's reopen our for loop. Now this time, we want to start it at 10. So let's say I is equal to 10. And now, how do we know to continue executing this code? Well, we want to say stop the code unless I is greater than 0. So, okay. And now, how do we go down by 1? Remember, we used plus plus last time. This time we can use minus minus. So, just like before, if we were to echo I and refresh our page, we would get 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in this case. Now this last case inside of a for loop here, it doesn't have to be plus plus, doesn't have to be minus minus. You can step it, so you can do I plus equals, or in this case minus equals 2. So this would go down by 2. So if we were to refresh, we would get 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. Yeah, that's pretty simple. So the first block in the for loop is where we are starting our loop at. And then the second block inside that for loop is when do we continue executing this code. And the third block is telling us how we should step through this for loop using the numbers we provided earlier. Now a fun thing we can do, you don't always have to use numbers. We can step through the alphabet using a for loop. So if we say, let's let I equal A, and then let's say when I is less than or equal to Z, and then just increment it. And then if we were to echo I, We get a lot of code here. Now, the reason it did that, if you can look closely at it, it got to Z, and then went A, B, A, C, all the way down to Z, or YZ. We don't want that. So we would have to see if it's less than Z. And if you try doing less than capital A, you'll get nothing, just like we just saw. In the next lecture, or when we start learning about arrays, so next week actually, I'll show you a better way to loop through the alphabet like we just did. Now that we know about our for loops, let's move on to a while loop. Alright, so just like a for loop, we would open it by saying while instead of for, and then we have our open and closing parentheses, and then a set of opening and closing curly braces. Now, in this case, a while loop, we want to put a conditional. So this is just an endless if loop until something is wrong. So we can put as many cases as we want in here. Blah, blah, blah. So, if we wanted to do the same thing from stepping from 0 through 10, we would need to set something on the outside. So, let's set I equal to 0 before we put our code inside this while loop. And in this case, while I is less than 10, so we have our conditional statement here. So, we can read it. So, while I is less than 10, do this. So we can echo I. Now, if I were to execute this code right now, we're going to get a nice endless, it's going to be an infinite loop. It's not going to stop. Why? It's because I is always 0. So if you're using a while loop and the conditional is based on a number, you want to remember to increment that number at the end of the while loop. So now I have while I is less than 10, echo I, and then increment I by 1. So now if I were to refresh this, I would get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. Simple. And you can also do multiple steps here. So while, I don't know, let's do j equals 5. So while I is less than 10 and j is less than 10, then we can echo I. So as long as they're both true, then it'll continue. So if I were to refresh this, we're only going to get up to this 9. Excuse me. But if I were to increment j here, it would only go 5 times. Because since j is already starting at 5, it's only going to take 5 times to get to 10. Cool. And another thing, we can do math in here, just like we're doing an if statement. So let's say while I times j is less than 20. And make sure to increment these. So in this case, we'll echo I times j. And it's going to go 0, 6, 14. Okay? Simple. Yeah, that's a while loop. So within a while loop, you can do multiple questions and multiple conditional statements. You can do an and, you can do an or you can even do an XOR. You can do not equals to, you can do equals to, everything like that. Now, say you want it to break out of the loop earlier than expected. What you would do, so I'm going to rewrite this conditional. While I is less than 10, increment 10. And now what I can do here inside of this, since it's just executing this code every single time it goes through this loop, let's do an if statement. So let's say if I equals 5. So if it equals 5, we just want to stop the code. Just whatever. Break. What a break will do is it'll break the loop, so it'll stop at that moment and it won't continue any further. So now if I were to refresh this, I would get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the reason it actually got to 5 is because we put the if statement after we echoed I. So if we were to just swap these two places, so if x equals 5, break, echo I. Now, oops, sorry, it's I, not x. Refresh. This time we would get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's because it found out I is finally 5, so we gotta stop. So that's how you can break out of a loop. You can also do that in a for loop, which I'll show you. So for I equals 0, while I is less than 10, increment I. If I happens to equal 5, we can break. I'll do a 7 this time just to show you. And we can echo I. So it's only going to get to 6. It's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's going to be like, huh, I is equal to 7 now, so it looks like we got to stop. And it did. Great. Now the last loop I want to share with you is the do-while loop. The difference between a do-while and a regular while is that a do-while will always have at least one output. It's guaranteed to execute the code at least once, while a while loop is not guaranteed to. So, to do a do-while loop, it's a little different. You would type the word do, and then you would open and close your curly braces first. And then after the curly braces, you would type while, and then open and close parentheses. And in this case, if we want to do the same, increment through 10, we can say while I is less than 10. So let's go ahead and set I equal to 0 up here. We can echo I. So anything that is within the curly braces, in all cases, will be the code that's executed, as long as this is true. And remember, we want to increment I, just so we don't get caught in an infinite loop. And we can refresh. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We get the same expected result as we were getting when we did the regular while loop. So let me show you how a do-while is always guaranteed to give you at least one result. So if I wanted to do while false, so false is never true. Let's echo hi. And if I were to go to run that on our page, we're going to get nothing. But if we changed it to do, echo hi, while false, we're going to get a hi, because it's looking at the code to be executed first, and then it's asking the question. So it's saying, hello, oh, you want to execute this? Awesome. Oh, but you don't want to execute it unless it's not this. Oh, okay. So it's guaranteed to give you that one result versus a while loop that is not guaranteed to give you any results. That's primarily the only advantage to a do-while. But in most cases, you're only going to find yourself using a while loop instead of a do-while loop. So, yeah. You can combine multiple these as well. So if I wanted to do a multiple 4, so if I is less than 10, and then while j is less than 10, echo I times j. So this is going to go 100 times actually, because it's going to see I is 0, and then it's going to go 0 through 10 of j, and then it's going to go back to the start, and now I is 1. So then it's going to go back through, j is 0 through 10. So it's going to do 10 times for each one. So if I were to go ahead and run this, let's space it out a bit. Now what I just did here, spacing it out like this, is called concatenation. So what I'm doing here is I'm echoing my math statement, I put a period, and then I put 2 quotes with a space inside of it. So that will combine the string into one. So now I can see every single result here. So you can see, actually that's after that, let's echo a break. So you can see, while I is 1, it's going to loop through j, 0, 1, 2, all the way through 9. And now I is 1. You can see the pattern all the way up to there. Awesome. That's one way that you can stack these 4 loops together. It's not recommended, but it's an easy way to print out a multiplication table. So, yeah. And of course you can do this with a while loop, a do while loop if you really wanted to. That's loops in a nutshell. Alright, so I will see you guys in a few days. And make sure to post any questions on the Google groups. Feel free to leave a comment on the video if you want. And if you have any personal questions, feel free to message me using my uReddit email, which is recck@ureddit.com. Goodbye.